Hi, it's Kirby Summers, and I welcome you to the Epstein Project podcast. This is going to be my Bill Gates podcast number 5. And I normally don't do podcasts every day. Usually I do one perhaps once a week. However, mainstream media is just covering up for Bill Gates in a very big way. And so I want to talk about what that cover up is, and then I want to explain to you what really has been going on. The fact that you have been given clues, but you're not really listening, at least people who are not focused on this case and know the nuances of this case, are missing important pieces that speak volumes about what really transpired between Bill Gates and Jeffrey Epstein. So that is the focus of my podcast today. And before I begin, once again, I want to thank everyone for the great comments you've left on my previous podcasts, on following me on Twitter, your incredible support, the fact that many of you have gone ahead and made contributions on my website, kirbysummers.com, that you've gone ahead and purchased my books or become members of Patreon and or have become subscribers to my newsletter, The Epstein Project, which is sent out, every Tuesday. So I want to thank you for that, because without your emotional support, which I get through your comments and your feedback on Twitter, and I get through the comments that you leave in the comment box under all of my videos, that's very inspiring. I do this, as you know, every single day for almost 2 years. I put in insane amounts of hours, 12 to 14 hours working on my books, doing research, staying in touch with you guys on Twitter and through the podcast and the newsletter. So it's a lot of work because, my goodness, mainstream media is really just not doing it. So, in the wake of the announcement that Bill and Melinda Gates are getting a divorce, what does mainstream media talk about? They talk about the fact that Melinda Gates became upset after a New York Times article of October 12th, 2019, where it was revealed that Jeffrey Epstein was spending more time with someone who had been convicted, spent time in jail for offenses relating to inappropriate behavior with minor girls. Uh, and they make it sound like Bill and Jeffrey Epstein just got to know each other after he was out of jail, and his reputation had been rehabilitated and all of that. Well, in my previous podcast, I do go into the fact that they knew each other from way long time ago. So I will be leaving links so that you can listen to the previous 4 podcasts I did, because I want to focus on some more intimate stuff today regarding Bill Gates and Jeffrey Epstein and some other people who have been in the shadows and really should not be in the shadows anymore. Um, in that article, in the New York Times article, it quoted Bill Gates as saying, during one of the many dinners he's had at Jeffrey Epstein's Upper East Side mansion, it quoted Bill Gates as having written to a colleague. A very attractive Swedish woman and her daughter dropped by, and I ended up staying there quite late. Bill Gates is talking about Eva Anderson Dubin and her then 15-year-old daughter, who dropped by during their dinner and he ended up staying there late. Well, it should not go unnoticed that in Jeffrey Epstein's homes, he had nude photographs of minors. He also had a life-size naked painting, museum quality painting of Ghislaine Maxwell, completely nude with her legs spread open. And there were other obscenities and pornographic images throughout the house. There were also young girls. So if we remember when Prince Andrew was at Jeffrey Epstein's house and someone dropped by, Prince Andrew was getting a foot massage by an Eastern European young girl. When questioned after it was revealed that Prince Andrew had an inappropriate relationship with Virginia Giuffre, not once, not twice, but 3 times, and that he had been going and staying at Jeffrey Epstein's various homes, perhaps 3 to 4 times every year, he could not remember the foot rub. Oh no, he must be mistaken. I was not getting my feet rubbed. Well, Jeffrey Epstein's modus operandi, for those of you who do not know, was it began with a foot rub. All right, that is sort of how his massages, which is a euphemism for the sex word, okay? That is how the massages always began. It began, especially if a girl didn't know or if they were going to just try to seduce a man, meaning, get him in a compromising position. And I'm not implying that Gates was being put into a compromising position. He's in a different league entirely. But it began with a foot rub, so that if Bill Gates was at Jeffrey Epstein's home, there were going to be young girls floating around, perhaps giving him a foot rub as well. And then suddenly, Eva Dubin, who is the ex-girlfriend, and that term girlfriend, when it applies to Jeffrey Epstein, may not be the way that you and I interpret that word, but apparently she was his ex-girlfriend for about a decade before Ghislaine Maxwell walked into his life. So when he was accused in Palm Beach of luring and raping minor girls, there was a note prepared called Personal History by one or more of Jeffrey Epstein's dream team attorneys. He had people like Alan Dershowitz, Kenneth Starr. I think he had about 6 or 8 attorneys representing him. And so there's a note, and it's a very glowing reference, and it sort of tries to steer the conversation away from Epstein's deviant sexual behavior, and it talks about his 2 long-term relationships with women, and it's again, it's called Personal History. So I'm going to read this to you regarding Eva Anderson, who is Eva Anderson Dubin. It begins, Jeffrey has had 2 long-term intimate relationships with women during his adulthood. In about 1981, Jeffrey met Eva Anderson, now Anderson Dubin, then 20, who was a Swedish model and former Miss Sweden. They developed a long and still enduring friendship. Their relationship endured for 11 years as an intimate one. During that time, Jeffrey encouraged Eva to fulfill her dream of becoming a doctor. He encouraged her and set about to pay her medical expenses at a school in Sweden. She reported that he frequently flew over to see her and ensure that she was keeping up with her studies. When she continued her medical studies in California, Jeffrey was there to cheer her on and pay her expenses. She successfully completed medical school and presently works in New York City as a well regarded internist. When it became clear, however, that the demands of Jeffrey's life could not include staying in one place and having a family, Eva Eva and he realized they had no future as a family unit. They parted amicably. Eva eventually married and has 3 children. This notwithstanding, they have continued to speak with each other nearly every day, as does her oldest daughter, Selena, having missed only a dozen or so times in the 26 years they have known each other. She described their current relationship today as follows. Today, Jeffrey is a very close and important friend to my family. He is the godfather of my 3 children and is close friend of my husband as well. Whenever Jeffrey is in New York, he will always come over in the evening and visit with us, help the children with their math homework, and conduct science Q&A at the dinner table. He will always remember the children's birthdays, and he is constantly on the lookout for educational games for the children. 4 years ago, when I had a cancer scare, Jeffrey was extremely supportive in visiting me every day in the hospital. I could not ask for a better friend or godfather to my children. And then it goes on to talk about Selena Dubin, whom Jeffrey has known since before her birth. Jeffrey has enjoyed an especially close relationship with Selena, age 12. Selena wrote glowingly of their weekly science lesson with Uncle Jeff, as she calls him. He takes time from his personal and business schedule to go over to her apartment and discuss science and mathematics that she is learning in school. They talk about things as why the sky is blue or how fast light travels. After their lesson is over, they spend some time at the piano where Uncle Jeff helps her work on her singing voice, even though she knows that he does not have any real expertise in this area. And it goes on to just talk about this glowing relationship that Jeffrey Epstein has with Selena Dubin. Selena Dubin, for those of you who have been following this story, is the girl, I believe she was 22 at the time, that Jeffrey Epstein wanted to marry. Okay, so he wanted, that's kind of bizarre on its own. He wanted to marry the 22-year-old daughter, and maybe she was 20. I would have to go back and check. So if you can just go back and check for me and add that in the comments, was she 20 or was she 22? Please, I would appreciate your help. So he wanted to marry the daughter of his ex-girlfriend who is still in his life. That alone is peculiar. But remember, I have been telling you from day one, which is almost 2 years now, that what Jeffrey Epstein and Ghislaine Maxwell were doing is a multi-generational uh, child trafficking crime, which had its beginnings way before Jeffrey Epstein and continues to present day with other people. So that when I say multi-generational, it means that you may have the mother or the father who is involved in this trafficking scheme, and then you have their children become involved as well. A very outspoken victim of Jeffrey Epstein, as everyone knows, is Virginia Giuffre. Many times, Virginia has dropped hints about Selena Dubin, feeling sorry for her, and she's also said that her life has been threatened. Think about it. She has been threatened. Her life has been threatened. I can't say that enough for you guys to understand the severity and the evil that exists underneath the layer of even the darkness that we already know about Jeffrey Epstein and Ghislaine Maxwell. That that Virginia would be threatened with death should she talk about Selena Dubin. Okay, well, you know what? I get threats every day. I am maligned. All kinds of things happen to me. But this is an important thing because we have been, not only are we being gaslit on a daily basis by the documentaries that are being made, that were made by mainstream media, by your news channel, by how they interpret, and by they, I mean mainstream, who is basically an arm of the intelligence agencies, how they kind of steer the conversation away from what this is all about. This is about child sex trafficking. That's what this story is about, for the purposes of blackmail and altering the laws and deciding who gets to run, well, forget running, who gets to sit in high positions in our governments, in our multiple governments. It's not just the United States, it's not just the UK, and it's not just Israel. I mean, these people are instrumental in deciding who's going to run a certain country in South America, who's going to run a certain country in Asia, who's going to, this is the kind of insidious blackmail operation that has been going on for a very long time. So that if Bill Gates, who is at one time he was the wealthiest man on the planet, when he met, according to the New York Times, when he met Jeffrey Epstein, he was the second wealthiest man in the world. And So, for Bill Gates to have made that comment about Selena Dubin, who was at the time 15 years old, is a big deal because that's a clue. Having been sexually trafficked and having been a sex slave to somebody in their circle, okay, I can tell you that a mother-daughter fantasy, about, like, men will have fantasies, and that is at the top. So, mother daughter fantasy is at the very top. That's followed by the fantasy of twins, which is followed by the fantasy of uh, sort of like a menage a trois. Okay, but the menage a trois is sort of like the third rank. The mother daughter is the first rank. Having a situation with twins is the second rank, and the third most requested thing is then a menage a trois. Um, so that when he says, and I'm going to repeat it, a very attractive Swedish woman with her daughter dropped by, and I ended up staying there quite late. Bill Gates said that. Um, what I want to bring to your attention is that in Jeffrey Epstein's Palm Beach mansion, when it was raided in 2005, there was a photograph of a 5-year-old girl, which has been put, it was initially put up, and then I think nobody's talking about it. I know that I've talked about it. I know that Matthew Steeples, you know, took a story that I had on Twitter and he put it in the Steeple Times, uh, where I basically say, yes, based on information that I gleaned from Virginia Giuffre, the photograph of this little 5-year-old girl with her underwear kind of pulled down, looking into the camera, I identified her as being Selena. And then when you go through the documents that were taken by the Palm Beach Police Department, Detective Ricari, so Joseph Ricari, who is now deceased, And so Joe Ricari and Ryder, I believe it's Michael Ryder. I'm not 100% sure, but I know his last name is Ryder. When they were investigating Jeffrey Epstein's Palm Beach mansion, the notes, the police notes include an interesting fact that there were photographs of one little girl in various stages of her life, and that little girl was photographed maybe when she was 2, later when she was 5, later when she was 7, and that Jeffrey Epstein had photographs of the little girl who has been identified as Selena Dubin throughout his throughout his home. Um, and so it is my opinion, and again, it's an opinion, that the media, while they are bringing your attention to the fact that Bill Gates was not a goody two shoes, that he was flirting with women who worked for him, which is called sexual harassment, by the way, because if he's your boss, right away, that's a very unhealthy work environment. It creates a hostile workplace. It's called sexual harassment, and that 2 women politely declined. And then the mainstream media talks about a consensual affair that Bill Gates ended 20 years ago. Uh, and they're talking about stuff that normally, if we were not connecting to Jeffrey Epstein, who was a known pedophile, and let's not forget Alex Acosta, he works for intelligence. I was told to stay away. Let's not forget Alex Acosta because this is an intelligence operation. So if we were talking about just Jeffrey Epstein, maybe who was a normal person having dinner many times with Bill Gates, and Bill Gates suddenly being revealed as, oh, he was having a couple of affairs, he was flirting with women. No, what we're really talking about is the fact that Bill Gates was hanging around with a pedophile who had young girls around, and it's my belief that something inappropriate may have happened, allegedly, with Bill Gates and Selena Dubin at the age of 15. And if that happened, what Melinda Gates is getting a divorce over is not that she was upset that he was hanging out with Jeffrey Epstein. No, she's upset to discover that very likely Bill Gates was doing the same thing that Prince Andrew was doing, the same thing that Bill Gates was doing. It's having inappropriate relationships with minor children. Minor children. What would that make Bill Gates? It would make him a rapist. And no mainstream media outlet has said, because if you have an inappropriate relationship with a minor, it is considered statutory rape. Additionally, all of the women that were involved and lured into this Jeffrey Epstein, Ghislaine Maxwell international trafficking ring, they were they were they were not really, they didn't stay because they wanted to stay. They stayed there because they were threatened. So they're coerced. So if you're a sex slave, because that's what that is, all right, and you're there and you're of age, it's still considered rape, because rape is defined by whether or not a person would normally agree to a consensual situation. I'm going to call it a situation with another human being. It's not because you have to. So whether the person is a minor or an adult, if you are coerced into having a relationship of of that nature with another person, it is still rape. So that's what we're talking about. Mainstream media is not going anywhere near this story. They probably never will. So, I encourage you to please subscribe to my Epstein Project newsletter where I will be discussing more of this in the near future. Um, it's almost 30 minutes, so I did have more about Bill Gates, believe it or not. I mean, I have been researching uh, the men in this group for about close to 30 years, because that's how long I have been harassed. So I have a lot more information. Stay tuned. I'd love to hear your comments. Please leave them in the uh, area below this video. And we'll pick this up. If I have to do 20 videos on Gates, I will, because you're not going to again hear this anywhere else. All right. Well, thank you for listening. Once again, it's Kirby Summers for the Epstein Project podcast. Have a good day. Bye.